Hello and welcome to today's chapter of Books in the World, a presentation of the Cape Cod Writers Center. I'm your host on today's program. I'm Bob Silverberg. And when I tell you that my guest is probably more read than seen, it will explain itself by saying that our guest is Saralee Perel, whose column appears not only in the Cape Cod Times, but by syndication in newspapers all across this land and in various parts of the world. And with that, we say welcome to you and welcome to Books in the World, Saralee Perel.
Well, thank you. I am so glad to be here.
I'm delighted you came in. I've read your book, which has a very strange title called, we're laughing already, we haven't even given the title of it, Cracked Nuts and Sentimental Journeys, and underneath, Stories of a Life Out of Balance. Is your life out of balance?
At times, literally and physically. But, yeah, I mean, I'm a nut. How else can I put it?
Self-proclaimed. And Steve and Susie in the control room have a picture of the front of your book, the one we've just named, Cracked Nuts and Sentimental Journeys. And if it comes up on the screen, and it will in a second or two, you will notice that it's out of focus. And when Eric was taking a picture of the book so we could bring it up in this program, he was adjusting the camera because all of the title is fuzzy.
I don't know why.
I don't know why either.
I don't know why.
It just kind of adds to what, the flavor of the stories inside?
Yeah, let's just say that. That'll work.
In and out of life's focus.
Okay, good. That should have been the subtitle.
It's interesting in your book, Sarah, that the first part is, well, they're all a list of your columns that you've written and have been read all over the place. But the first section of them are outright funny. And then you get kind of sentimental, and then you get real family-oriented, and there's a whole flow of different aspects of, I guess, life in general.
Well, that's life. I don't mean to be so. I mean, this is the truth of everyone's life, isn't it?
You know, the funny parts and the strange parts and so forth.
It's just that I have a knack somehow to point them out and to see the goofy parts or the funny parts in this. You know, and I just get very involved in things I'm doing. I'm very involved right now, and this will make a wonderful column, by the way. I know it will.
I better watch what I say and do.
No, because I always get permission. Don't. Everybody says what you said. Go ahead.
You get permission. Do you get permission from your husband, Bob?
No. Because
you write about him a great deal, and he's not just Bob. He's my husband, Bob. You know, the two words in the name. And my husband, Bob, shows up in so many of your stories.
Let me tell you something.
Tell me.
First of all, I do get his permission. He loves it. No matter how he is portrayed in my stories, everyone says, oh, poor Bob. Now, when I go anywhere to write a check, anywhere, they go, oh, you're Saralee? And I go, yeah. And before I even say yes, they go, where's Bob? Is he with you? I have to meet Bob. And I think, I wrote it, hello. Not even a word to me. Everyone wants to see Bob because he is.
Well, you've made him famous.
Well, provides me with so much material.
Whether he figured on it or not.
Pardon me?
I said whether he figured on being material for your columns or not.
Yeah, yes, but he does approve of. He loves it.
All right, well, we'll get to Bob, my husband, Bob, all in one phrase.
Who was my student, Bob, when I first met him?
Oh, tell me more.
When I used to have courage when I was younger, I used to teach. I was asked to teach courses at Mass Maritime Academy, at Cape Cod Community College, lecture everywhere. One of the courses I decided to teach, was asked to teach, was called Life After Divorce. Now, I never had been married, but I didn't worry about any of this. And I taught it.
You were teaching a course of life after divorce.
At the community college.
And you weren't divorced?
No, I had never been married nor divorced, but I had a 22-year psychotherapy practice during which I worked with all. And he came from Arizona, happened to turn around one day, took that course, and that's how he was my student.
And that was it. The thunderbolt struck.
Thank goodness.
Now, in your early life, as you mentioned, but even before teaching, you were, according to my notes and according to your story, in psychiatry practice.
Right on Barnstable Harbor, a beautiful office, for 22 years.
20 years, and you've left that.
I left that because insurance, I did love it, but insurance, I won't go into it a long time, but insurance regulations take over what a therapist is allowed to do in their practice, and younger therapists can pull it off. After a while, I just said, I can't make my own decisions here without an approval from an insurance company, and I had to stop. Plus, I had started writing then, so it was a wonderful transition.
Yeah, so each day was 3 hours of therapy for somebody and 21 hours of paperwork.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so let's take the next step, Saralee Perel. So you decided that part of your earlier life and your career was at an ending. And who decided or what decided you to write? Or have you been writing right along?
No, the last thing I had written was my high school play. I had ideas day after day after being married to Bob. I thought, this is a funny story. It's so funny when he, with his compost, with his gardening, with his, nothing that works, but he's just a love and we have a marriage, cliche as it sounds, made in heaven. So I kept thinking, I have so much material. I started submitting incorrectly, and I hope other people know this. I started submitting to the big guns right away. Family Circle magazine, which after a while started taking my columns.
So you were sending stuff out?
Not to the right. But then finally Bob said, why don't you write to the Cape Cod Times? And I did, and it was the best decision I ever made because I wrote to a gal who was in charge then named Alicia Blaisdell Bannon, who everyone probably knows. I sent 3 columns. She wrote back saying, this is good stuff, and hooked me up with the editor. I started then, and from there I was able to collect a lot of clips, they're called clips, to send Cape Cod Times columns. That is my biggest love. I've been doing it for 17 years, once a month. That is my favorite. But but then once you start small, or locally, not small, then you're able to switch and open, and other people like the Reeves Foundation I'm fortunate to write for, and I'm blanking right now as to all of the other places, but
they'll all come to you.
Okay.
All right.
No.
So I understand that once the Times started to print your material, it got into syndication, but that's not automatic from writers.
Oh my Lord, no.
How did that happen?
I started syndication with a syndicate who didn't pay, and I thought that, well, maybe that's a good idea. Well, that wasn't. So I went on to my own, and I won some more national awards than you could possibly get into a half-an-hour program, which really sounds so full of myself. But that really helped me, and I go through submitting briefly query letters, attaching 2 or 3 of the best award-winning columns, and charging it $20, which is not much, but it adds up. You won't get in if you charge. You won't. It's just not an easy business, and therefore all the the newspapers and many of the newspapers in the country have picked me up on a regular basis.
I'm just trying to follow the steps. So you were in the Cape Cod Times, and you took some of the columns that had appeared there.
They have Cape Cod Times has first print rights, so everything has to start there.
All right. And the columns you felt had a little extra grab to them, perhaps, or for other readers who hadn't read them. I assume that. So you were sending these out to who? Or to
well,
what?
I would send them off Cape because the readers here had read them. So I would send them to usually women's magazines. The Reeve Foundation was a natural with a spinal cord injury. All of this took place after a while, though, because I had to have more clips. I had to have Family Circle clips meaning, you know what a clip is.
It appeared in Family Circle magazine, yeah.
So I had to build it up, not just with the Cape Cod Times. I had to do a lot of building up till a point where I had a portfolio that someone would take a look at. And Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Chicken Soup for the Soul is a very, very famous title of a very famous
They've
book.
taken 40 of my publications, and
Do they keep reprinting Chicken Soup for the Soul with new stuff in it?
Well, yeah, they have 4 to 5 new books a year, all of which are bestsellers on different topics. So
yeah, Chicken Soup for the whatever, and something else for the soul, and this for the
$200 a story, which is very high paying, plus 10 books. Now I had to. Everyone says to me, I help people get into Chicken Soup, or I try, and they say, oh, I sent them story and I never heard. Now, I sent them 40 stories before I started hearing, and once I did, I was being picked up constantly. You can't stop. You can't express.
I would think after sending 10, 20, 30, you might become a little discouraged.
Well, then you're just never going to get, yes, you could just get discouraged, but if you're not going to continue on, your chances are none. If you continue on, your chances are 1 out of 100. But otherwise, you have no chance. And that's what I would say myself. I'd say, you have no chance if you do not sit down and do this one more time.
And you did, and it seemed to work. For anyone who might not realize the workings of syndication, these are companies that, publish or send out for publication, or what? I'm stammering here because I don't know all the ins and outs of it.
Right now, syndicates are narrowing. Getting into a syndicate, really, I would not try right now. I really wouldn't even. I don't know if I don't have his permission to use his name, so I better not. But a friend who's, everybody would know, cannot get syndicated. It's just the giant ones, King Features, now I can't think of it.
Companies that supply articles, columns, comic strips. 2
papers all over the country, exactly. Getting in there really, really is hard. So when I tried, I was with one, but I wasn't happy with it. And then I said, I tried it on my own. Now, that's the difference between joining a syndicate. I'm self-syndicated. So from my computer, from Saralee Perel, I find the editor, you've got to get the connection or it's not going to get anywhere. And put some snappy subject line, and a real very brief query letter, and that's how I'm getting syndicated. And I have to do hundreds of them to get to 44 newspaper, hundreds of queries.
The number again, you were in 40 different papers?
Now I'm in 44 different newspapers.
44 different papers. And that's once a month, is it? Or each monthly column? Yes. That must be extremely satisfying.
Oh, it's wonderful. I have my email in there. The satisfying thing is that I hear from people all over the country and the world who feel that they know me, and in many ways they do. I am so honest.
Well, the phrase "in many ways they know me" must be very, very clear to anyone who reads your columns, Sarah, because you tell everything. There are really no secrets. You have your feelings about your husband, of course, about everyday living, about the garden, about the dog, about the cat.
The cockamamie garden. I had to get that in there. Go ahead. The dog, yeah.
But there are no secrets in what you write about.
Why would I do it? I have to put my heart into it, or I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Now, hearing from people around the world, I'm sure they tell you their stories as well.
Some.
And everybody likes to think in one way, well, I'm sort of particular and personal and rather important, and the same woes or the same happiness or the same, to use the word cockamamie again, actions happen to people all over the place.
Or the same losses. I write about my parents, and others of my family, of my animal family, have gone by. Yes, they do.
Yep. And the mother-daughter thing. I have 2 daughters, and they have a mother. Is it always 90% a battle between mother and daughter, or if not a battle, a query ground, sort of a shaky ground?
I hate to say yes to that because that is so stereotype. But I think well, put it this way, it certainly is something more people will read than not, because more people relate to this or not, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's sociology of the time. I don't think it's an innate mother-daughter. I mean, what about fathers? And I don't know why that's so popular, but mothers and daughters, compulsive eating is one of my most popular, binge eating in a funny way, dieting, losing weight, hello, which sells all the women's magazines.
No.
And mothers and daughters and pets are my biggest.
Uh-huh.
You know, both sad, and I mean, I had very sad stories about my mother. It was very sad.
Yeah, but
that was the way it was.
But that's human, and that's what the connection is all the way through.
And I received more responses from the poignant stories than I do the humor one. I receive a lot of responses. I'm blessed. I have thousands of responses. But when I hit home with something poignant, that someone has said, I cannot believe she has gone through this with her mother. Not that my mother was terrible. She was a product of her times. She was wonderful.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make it worse.
I know you're not. I know you're not. But those are equally as important as the humor cockamamie.
Yeah, no, it's true when you stop to think about it, as I am, even as we speak about it, that humor is a delight, and you read funny things, as we do in the book called Crack Nuts and Sentimental Journeys by our guest Saralee Perel. But when there's something that touches in the family, that kind of stops you, and you say, yeah, you know, it's warm, it's close, sometimes it tears up a little bit.
Many people do that. They laugh and they get tearful. Yeah. But I end with all my heart, I end on something that is not made up, but that is positive, because there is no reason to be ending on depressive notes. We have to be able to do something. Whether it's thinking something differently, whether it's connecting with me, that's just that. Whether it's anything, it cannot just be this horrible thing happened by Saralee Perel. I mean, it's got to turn around, and I will never write a column that doesn't turn around.
Mm-hmm. I made a few notes along the way, Saralee. An earlier novel, it says, Raw Nerves, a Cape Cod thriller, a work of fiction. I've got a half an answer here. Not a work of fiction. Or some fiction.
It's about a neurotic Cape Cod psychotherapist who is a compulsive eater.
Anybody you know?
Barnstable Harbor. But one of her patients is, it's very funny, but it's also a mystery. One of her patients is out to murder her, and the reader needs to figure out which one it is. There's a second one I have my agent pitching also about. Her name is Sophie Green. These people become real.
Your second book, or a new book called The Dog Who Walked.
That's another one. Now that's my first nonfiction, and that's about Gracie. And
Gracie is your dog.
The dog we
dog.
lost, yes. Who was the person who helped me. Who was the person who stayed by me, which sounds, I mean, Bob did too, but who helped me walk.
You said just now, Saralee, a person who.
I did?
Yes.
Isn't that?
We're talking about a dog, but you said a person who.
Good catch, and you're right.
Yeah, and if we're looking for proper grammar, it would be a dog that, but
or
this
we're looking
became
for
a
emotional.
Person who. And Gracie, your dog, you say walked me. Tell me the story.
I surprised Bob with this because I used to have an attitude that what the doctor said, done. I'll never walk again. That's what I was told, and that's what and I was adamant. And people used to get so annoyed at me, but I was adamant. And then one day I said, Gracie and I planned when Bob was not in the house, for me to hold on to her harness, and for her and I too, she and I, to walk 10 feet at a time in the backyard. 20 feet in the time. She would stop. There was a twig, or not a twig, or any obstacle. She would stop so I would see it, and then she and I would settle, and we'd sit, And then she'd help me up again. And eventually, we made it to 10 miles.
10
and one day,
miles?
one day, Bob came home and I said, I've got something to show you. And I had showed him my pedometer, and he said 10 miles. It said 10 miles. And he didn't, it was like showing him something from outer space. He didn't compute. He said, yeah, it says 10 miles. 10 miles. I said, well, don't you know what that means? I mean, it took me 7 or 8 hours to do that. But that,
Well, of course.
He said, well, it means you to walk 10 miles. And I'll never forget his face. And I could get tearful thinking about it. He was stunned.
He was astounded. You were astounded.
I never thought it would happen.
And your dog Gracie just took it in stride, probably.
Oh, she was very snuggle. And we all would hug, and she would always wiggle and hug. And
Dogs are wonderful.
this was an incredible. Everybody says my dog was incredible. This dog was incredible.
This dog Gracie, a human dog.
You're funny that you caught that. Very good. I'm not taking it back.
Yeah, but it kind of watched over you, didn't it?
She did. She was the dog who watched over me all of the time, above and beyond her needs.
Uh-huh.
She wouldn't have eaten if I hadn't gotten out of bed.
She would just stay with you?
Yes, but she was not like this prior to, I call it D-Day, Disability Day. It just kicked in. She became very maternal and protective, and
Dogs, and to a degree, cat too. We're not going to leave them out of it. But they sense when their owner, when their keeper is not well.
She sure did. And then when the tables were turned, the same. She then could not walk.
Yeah.
And she cannot.
And, yeah, she lived her a good life, a long life. Yeah. You mentioned your disability, and you have a cane here, and you walk slowly into the studio today, and yet it wasn't from an external accident injury. You talk about it in your book, Saralee Perel. It was a different sort of disability.
It's shocking.
One that I wasn't aware of until I read about it.
Nobody, even my neurologist in Boston, isn't.
Would you tell us about it?
Yes, it's amazing. One morning, January 22nd, so we're close to 10 years, almost 10 years ago, I woke up one morning. Well, I had been a kayaker, a runner, a biker, and I had no injury.
Mm-hmm.
One morning I woke up and I thought, gee, I'm feeling wobbly. And I happened to call a doctor I know at Dana-Farber, not from being treated there, just so it doesn't complicate the picture, just because we became friends. I told her my symptoms. She knows how insane and terrified I am of going to a doctor no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm having trouble walking. And she asked some questions, and she said very sweetly, and she loves Bob, she said, let me just say hi to Bob, who was walking Gracie in the woods. I said, oh, he's walking Gracie. She said, I'll call him on myself. Mm-hmm. And Bob came home from the walk and said, we have to talk. Her name is Judy, and she said, Judy wants you in that hospital in an hour, in Brigham and Women's, and to pack your bags, because they will admit you. And what happened was 2 vertebrae in my neck overnight, no warning, no accident, no rheumatoid arthritis, no bone disease, anyway, separated and made a rapid progression across one another, severing quite a bit of my spinal cord fast. By the time we got to the hospital, which I had to go, I couldn't chicken out. I lost sensation in my legs, my midriff, my arms. Things were just happening so fast. And on that right before the operation, the neurologist, a wonderful guy named Eric Woodard, said you had 1 hour to get here, or you would have been severed completely in a vent-dependent
And
quad.
this happened out of nowhere. It's a very uncommon situation, isn't
He's
it?
never seen it before. No, I don't know of anyone else who has ever seen it before. It was shocking. Life
I would
changed.
imagine so.
After getting back from the hospital, that's when Gracie, responded so strongly to my brace and my weakness and sadness and illness. So that's when that whole started with.
Yeah.
Yes, it's been shocking.
Wow, so Gracie sort of took over.
Yeah.
You mentioned in your book, in fact, you write about it, and you make light of some of it, which is rather remarkable.
It is remarkable.
But you mentioned Bob Lobel.
Yes.
And
he's a sportscaster. He's a wonderful guy. And he's been on, I'm interrupting you so much.
No, go right ahead. We only have a couple of minutes left, but I want to get the Bob Lobel story because it ties in with what you just said.
I watched an NECN or NECN interview of him at Spalding, at Whittier. This was only about 3 years ago. And he said, this has happened out of nowhere. And he had the same neurologist. The same thing. The
same thing happened to him.
And I somehow was able to get through to him in email, and he just jumped in. He said, I have to see you, I have to see you. Well, I've never, and so we have been very, very, very close, you know, just trying to find help. And
yeah, so it's a very odd medical experience, but you and Bob Lobel have experienced the same disability.
Yes, how odd. His name is, he goes by Lobie.
Lobie.
Yeah, but he's picked up his life and is now, you know, doing a lot more sportscasting now.
And you've picked up your life too.
Yep, it's a process.
It's a process. And there's a no-hold story for every one of those processes, and the dog and the cat and our guest today, Saralee Perel. The book we're talking about is a collection of the things we've been talking about this very moment in the program.
And the photos are great. The photos in there are
and the
priceless.
photos in here too. The book is called Crack Nuts and Sentimental Journeys, a very warm collection of stories indeed by our guest on today's Books in the World, Saralee Perel. Saralee, thank you for coming in and being here today.
Thank you. Thank you. You've been wonderful.
Well, thank you.
You really.
And again, thank you for looking in today as another chapter goes by of the Books in the World, a presentation of the Cape Cod Writers Center. Thank you for viewing. Thank you, Sarah.